Welcome to the Pro-Brick exclusive YouTube channel with Reverend Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist. So you find yourself in a relationship and everything's going along pretty well, and you're down mixing or up mixing with members in the family, and you relatively receive pretty well. Everything's going fine. Things are going along pretty well. The first rule of relationships is to understand that not everything is as it seems on the surface. If you're dealing with critical people, I can promise you signs of critical thinking, critical diagnosis on certain events, and that is going to bring that same attitude. It will come back at you at some point. That attitude is going to come round to get you. You need to listen very carefully to what the new person that you're with, or even the person that you're with have been for a while, what their attitudes are in the conversations they partake in. In some cases, these people will know that their attitude's not going to be all for them if they get exposed. And a lot of people pride themselves on emotional violence in the form of the way they speak of people in their life. Now, a lot of emotional violence gets thrown like a tennis ball just into the wind. You see people when they're practicing, these tennis champions, they'll hit the ball when they're practicing their serves, and the ball goes across the net and just falls to the ground and rolls and ends up wherever it wants to. A lot of emotional violence practiced in domestic homes is no different to the way that tennis balls hit with aggression and really just goes nowhere and falls on the ground. In saying that, if you watch the accuracy of the ball as it goes over the net when you're watching them practice and see how good the practice shot is, you can tell how good that person is at what they're doing. Now, guys, you need to be, and ladies and gentlemen, you need to be doing this while you're navigating the best part, delivering the best part of yourself within the relationship. Okay, you need to be practicing the best attributes of yourself in the relationship, but at the same time diagnosing and evaluating the attitudes and characteristics of the person that you're with, because behind the scenes those attitudes and characteristics will in one way or another be you will circulate in them emotionally. Okay, and this is called passive aggressive emotional violence. For me, that's what I call it. You've got to work out how emotionally violent these people are in the passive aggressive realm of their mind. You've got to understand, and this is a big word, but there's pathological people who operate in passive aggressive emotional violence. And then there's all other clinical terms that they use for this. I'm not an expert on all that, but what I do know is you can tell by the way people speak about others, about family members, and the way that they deal with things inside their family, and the way they go about interacting and as it were, running after people in that family. You'll work out the hierarchy the way in which they deal with things, the way in which they go about covertly assassinating people's character. A lot of it's covert, but it becomes part of the verbal formation within the family. And these are the verbal maps, right? The verbal psychological maps that you can read to try and understand the person that you're in a relationship with. Too many people are going into relationships blind. They're being psychologically damaged. They're being psychologically assaulted and abused, emotionally damaged and abused. And this is because they're letting their faithfulness and loyalty blind them from the reality of the person that they're being involved with. And it's all miscued. It doesn't have to be that way. Hey buddy, how are you? The scriptures say, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. That's a key phrase. Okay? But at the same token, what's going on in the heart before the mouth speaks? All right? You might not be there for those words, but you may be in there, in that mind, being punched around, and nobody even know it. Okay? People can say things to your face, but where do you really sit in their mind? And if you're trying to explain to someone you need something resolved, whatever the problem might be resolved, and they're listening to you and ignoring you, right? Jeopardizing the relationship, postponing resolve, right? Deliberately postponing the resolve. That's emotional violence. Oh, you might say, no, it's not. Oh, yes, it is. If you're trying to build a relationship and you've got a person blocking that by unresolved, that's emotional violence, because it's going against the nature of how a relationship should track, should progress. But people, your normal Joe Spong and that, just don't recognize things this way. They don't want to read the person that they're involved with to see where it's all going to end up. Now, just because the person's physically present and going through all the motions, probably only because you're functioning, particularly when you get to this age, there's a lot of physical supply getting sought after, and if you're delivering that, the person will keep turning up. If you're not, you can kiss them goodbye. You need to go way beyond that and read what's going on in the silence of that person's mind. And there's only one way you can read where they're at. And this is vital. Unresolved and resolved. If somebody's working to resolve the micro adjustments, micro emotional, psychological and physical adjustments that align them better with you, without controlling, without manipulating, just respectful, harmonious interpersonal adjustments, characteristic and personality adjustments, then that's a functioning relationship. It's the people that aren't micro incrementally doing this that are going to be trouble, that are going to be danger. Because if they're not putting the effort in to the growth of the relationship through micro and incremental interpersonal harmonious adjustments, then they're not interested in the relationship. They're just coming to you for supply, physical and emotional supply. Now, what a lot of people allow to have happen to them is they'll trust, they'll presume that the person that they're with is in the same mind as them. Okay? I liken this to, and this is a little bit rough, but I liken this to a mouse in a cage that's sitting in the corner of the cage in the sawdust, just going about its business while the world's passing it by. The mouse isn't taking notice of anything. Okay? It's just going through its motions. But the researcher is tampering with its psychology by doing experiments and all this other stuff. Now, should the mouse know? No. Is the research taking place? Yes. Why can't? Well, humans are different. Humans should be able to know. Humans should be able to study and know constructively what is happening in the mind of the person that they're with. This comes down to the powers and principles of transparency. Everything comes back to how the person shows you their mind. Okay. Now, this will be simple for somebody at the start of a relationship, because they've probably been lonely. They probably want to try and build a relationship, and they want to make the effort to express themselves why, so they can help that person get to know who they are. It's very simple, isn't it? It's all very simple, but it's not, because people are not being taught the arts of constructive discernment, constructive boundaries, emotional boundaries, physical boundaries. People are not practicing the sacred arts of the biblical principles to protect themselves from evil. They're not doing it anymore. That's not including the Christian communities, of course. But don't underestimate the deceitfulness and cleverness of religious people either in different forms of micro evil. And I'm using the word micro because it's all covert. The fallen human nature has the innate ability to chameleonize itself within good intention. The fallen human nature has the innate ability to chameleonize itself within good intention. And what people are trying to do when they meet someone, listen to this very carefully because it's true. What people are trying to do when they meet someone is work out how much of the fallen human nature the destructive innate nature that we have within us when we're born and through our lives is working within the characteristics of the personality of that person. That's what people are initially trying to find out when they meet someone. But that falls away, and it falls away fast. Psychological self-preservation needs to stay in place, not in terms of fearfulness, but in terms of healthiness, because you can still function with integrity, with your discernment and other calculating, personality calculating abilities in place. See, a lot of people make the mistake of what they would describe falling in love. Really, it's not falling in love. They're just making themselves vulnerable, very vulnerable, and at the mercy of the character and attributes of the person that they're with. It's actually a form of personal negligence, a loss of personal duty of care. And these same people who are willing to abandon their boundary senses will, when they come to their senses, try and measure the situation, the intimate situation that they've put themselves in, but they haven't kept their emotional boundaries in place to protect themselves from possible damage that could be done. And it's no good after the fact if you've dropped your personal duty of care. Now, some people want to live like this. They get the thrill of it, the danger of it, but they end up with nothing and no one, because they're not navigating the pathways of life in a way in which they prosper. Because prosperity is directly related to the way in which we share ourselves and navigate ourselves with people and life. And good and evil is on our toes and around our mind all the time, in the form of nature and the spiritual realm. And you have to be able to discern by decision, by your senses, what you're giving, what you're taking, and what the other person is giving and what they're taking from you. And that goes for life as well, because by nature life wants to take from you. You have to make effort if you want it to give. That's why winning a prize or getting something for nothing is so outstanding, it's so exhilarating. But how many people have won the lotto only to realise after they've been paid out they haven't got the character, the psychological muscle to navigate the prosperity in a way in which they succeed. They lose it, they waste it. So they've had success in their hands, but they haven't been able to they haven't had the psychological or characteristic knowledge or familiarity to be able to navigate this in a way in which they remain in the momentum of the accumulation. And so they go back back to their default of what they're used to, which is a steady progression of loss. And you can tell from a person's value for what they accumulate where you're going to end up as well, because we're not single for no reason. Let's just face it. And these reasons are due to a lack of unresolved, due to a default or defect in people's capabilities to maintain a relationship at a healthy level for both people. Now, as I said, anybody can do that at the start. But let's see what happens when the relationship starts to get fallout. Let's see what manifests then. That's when you start to see who the real person is. I'll go on with this in the next talk. Thank you for joining me, Reverend Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist on the ProBrick exclusive YouTube channel. Bye for now.